Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Planetary Warfare, written by Storm's Wrath. Planetary warfare. It was mostly an outdated concept before the Terrans came. Why deploy infantry on a planet when you could simply park your fleet in its orbit and bombard your enemy's cities? When the Mirians declared war on the Terrans, everyone thought that they were finished. All the Terrans had going for them was advanced shielding technology. Their guns couldn't pierce the Mirian shields or armor. Their missiles were slow and easily avoided. Only higher caliber Terran weapons could pierce Mirian battlesuits. The Mirians knew this, of course. They also knew that any and all shields required power. So, when the Mirian fleet entered the Sol system, they began eliminating power sources, fusion reactors, antimatter reactors, even fission and solar power generators. But it wasn't enough. The third planet in the Sol system, Earth, was the Terran Hellwolder, and they didn't use fusion power, more antimatter power for their shields there. They were there, of course, for redundancy, but mostly powered Terran cities. No, the Terrans used something called geothermal power for their shields. All they had to do was to place a few million heavily shielded power generators inside the mantle under the ocean and just cycle the heated ocean water through some fans for power. Then send the extreme amount of generated power to incredibly powerful shield generators, and suddenly, Earth became a fortress. This was possible because of the type of world that the Terrans inhabited. The surface of the planet wasn't uniform and was divided into several different pieces. These pieces moved around and against each other, generating pressure released in events called earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. The core of the planet generated huge amounts of heat and pressure. This geothermal power continually sustained heavy orbital shielding over almost all of Terran homeworld. Even the oceans, vast swaths of water, were completely covered as some of these plate boundaries ran through them. There was a single hole in the shield, however. Well, it wasn't a hole, really. It was still able to prevent orbital strikes and planet crackers from reaching the surface, but it was thin enough to get some drop pods through. The Mirians didn't stop to think about whether it was intentional. Of course, the Terrans didn't just sit idle when the Mirian fleet sat in orbit. Sometimes the planetary shield would flare, releasing powerful electromagnetic pulses that scrambled targeting systems. A few Terran ships were always whittling away at the Mirian fleet, though they did little damage. The Mirian commander gave the order to retreat, not because they were beaten, but because they did not have the technology to win. 30 years later, the Mirians came back with a larger fleet, carrying millions of soldiers and hundreds of thousands of drop pods. They blockaded the system and destroyed the orbital defense platforms orbiting the moons and planets. They couldn't get at the space elevators, which were covered under the planetary shields. During the 30 years, the Terrans had built larger and thicker shields all over the rocky planet and moons in their system. The Earth shield alone was nearly 5 times as strong as it had been when the Mirians had left the Sol system. The Terrans broadcasted a message with enough power to be detected across nearly a tenth of the galaxy. Surrender! The Mirians began deploying their drop pods over the observed hole in the Terran shielding. They landed in the northern part of one of the continents, a region named Canada. And while they braved the thick snow and the frigid cold, their fleet in orbit was attacked. It wasn't hit by the Terrans, really. But when you make the best shielding technology in the galaxy, that gets you allies very quickly. So the Terrans' aligned factions pinned the Mirians against the planetary shields of Earth. It wasn't an extremely savage battle, as the Mirians just moved their fleet away from the Allied fleets. The Allied fleets let them do so. The shield curved downwards towards the planet as the Mirians got closer, under the fire of Terran allies and pinned between a rock and a hard place. They chose the rock. They landed their light fighters in the Terran atmosphere, unable to properly target cities due to the electromagnetic interference. The battlecruisers and dreadnoughts of the Miriams remained in high orbit. Nothing could touch them under the cover of their combined shielding. Or so they thought. As it turns out, extremely efficient geothermal power could be weaponized. The Terrans knew how to increase volcanic pressures with a few underground fusion bombs. Other planets had volcanoes as well. It was common on planets and moons exposed to heavy tidal gravity. But the Miriams did not have any proper models for a super volcano. The Terrans did. The Miriams detected a massive explosion on the surface of the planet, an impossibly large volcanic caldera, thought dormant by the Miriams in their initial scan of Earth's surface, had erupted. The shockwave circled the planet dozens of times, but the Miriams had a larger problem. The power of the eruption had destroyed most of their infantry forces and nearly all of their cruiser escorts. The ash made the power draw of their shields increase by nearly 20 times. The Miriams surrendered from the helm of their finest dreadnought, now barely able to keep the lights on. The Terrans accepted their surrender promptly. 10 days later, they sent another message to a wider galaxy. We don't just fight on our planets. We fight using our planets. End of story. Story number 2. Making an Omelet, written by T. Speyer. I was sent as a part of the evaluate delegation to Earth. One of our stealthier agents had picked up a warning that humans had some rather frightening ideas, chief amongst them being, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. The meaning of this saying was not entirely clear, so we investigated. As the member of the team with the most human-like biochemistry, I was assigned to investigate actual omelets. I objected that this was a waste of my time, but we were told to be thorough. I've submitted my report on omelets under a separate cover. No one should bother to read it. In the process of observing, though, I noticed 2 things that are of interest. The first was the cook's spatula, which was flexible enough to follow the curvature of the plan. Now, spatulas are pretty common amongst industrialized omnivorous species, and flexible spatulas are hardly unknown. But they usually are made out of an organic polymers that don't take heat well, and the pan was directly over an open methane flame. Aren't you worried about heat will damage our spatula? I asked. Nope, he said. The spatula is silicon. It's designed for this. Silicon? Yes, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it's a silicate polymer with really good heat resistance, great for cooking implements. Silicate polymer? Now, I learned in school that silicates form crystals, and occasionally amorphous solids that are as rigid as crystals. Silicates don't form flexible structures. That's why the galaxy is full of carbon-based life, and not silicon-based. Silicon would be too rigid. You probably know that too. Apparently, nobody told the humans, despite the fact that their planet is 70% silicate crystals with no naturally occurring silicate polymers. So, they wanted a silicate polymer, and they went out and made one. This got me looking a little more closely at the rest of his tools. I noticed that the half-made omelet wasn't sticking to the pan at all, despite having some pretty sticky things in it. I asked about this, and he said the pan was coated in Teflon, an extremely non-sticky material. Why does it stick to the pan, then? I asked. He laughed. Apparently, it was a running joke of some sort amongst the humans. Then he explained. It's a pretty involved process, actually. I'm a little vague on the details, but, there's some sort of high-temperature ion bombardment to strip the fluorines from the pan side of the molecules. Fluorines? I repeated. That was the last thing I had expected to hear in the context of cooking. I was too shocked to be shocked. Yeah, he said, as if there was nothing shocking about it. That's what makes it so non-sticky. The outer layer is all fluorine bonded to a carbon backbone. Stickiness is mostly about covalent bonds, but no oxidizer in food can pry the carbon away from those fluorines. But, fluorine? How many scientists died putting this together? Teflon and sulfur? I don't think any. The, early history of fluorine chemistry had a lot of casualties. So that's humanity. Forget breaking eggs. Apparently, the saying should be that you can't make an omelet without completely rewriting the structure of matter and performing high-energy transformations on the single deadliest corrosive gas in the universe. With a lot of casualties. So, I do endorse opening trade relations. There's a lot to be gained, but we also need to employ extreme caution in dealing with them because they won't be employing any caution at all. End of story. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Bob the Dragon, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Estrella the Dreamer, Tryagain95, Fudigiol, Meridian117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.